Hi everyone, it's Tanya Kraus and you are joining me for Let's Talk Horses. So you probably may have watched episode 1, so I'm not going to go into what we're about in great detail, but we are a new show and geared towards obviously the horse community, where I'm going to share with you training tips, and topics, a little bit of discussion around training tips and topics, reviews on products, interviews with industry professionals, rider hacks, and industry news. So let's get started. Today's episode is on bits versus bitless. So this is a really cool topic because it is often controversial, to say the least, and certainly most horse people have an opinion one way or another. So what I wanted to talk about in regards to bits versus bitless is not the pros and cons of bits and not the pros and cons of bitless, but more what I'm hoping that the equestrian community can start to think about in regards to all of our equipment, and that is the who, what, where, when, why. Okay, so I've got a skull here to help me have a little bit of an overview of our equipment and how it works. And that's probably the first question that we need to ask ourselves in regards to equipment is, how does it actually work? So when we're talking about a snaffle bit, for example, a snaffle bit is what is a lateral device. So a snaffle bit works laterally side to side. When we're talking about a shank bit or a bridle bit, and here in Australia, people will often refer to their bridle and they've got a snaffle bit on it. That's not technically, it's not correct. It might be your bridle, but it's got a snaffle bit on it. A bridle is actually a vertical bit. Okay, so a shank, a western bit, a spade, a Portuguese bit, they work differently. So a snaffle bit works from side to side. A vertical bit works more on the vertical plane. So both are in the mouth of the horse, of course. A bit is designed to go in the mouth of the horse. And then typically when people are talking about bitless, it is something that is without a bit. It is something that operates on the outside of the horse. But not all bitless are created equal. Not all bits are created equal. So I think what we need to do is take each individual piece of equipment and think about how it's meant to work, okay, and what its purpose is for. So when I say that, what I mean is, and it would be impossible for me to go through every single different type of piece of equipment, but what I probably will do is, my partner, Phil Monaghan, does an excellent gear talk where he uses the skull and he talks about all the different, not all the different, but the different styles of bits, how they work, and the different styles of bitless and how they work. So we'll probably do a whole show on probably how your equipment works, whereas today we're just talking about bit versus bitless as a concept. So bits go in the mouth, bitless not in the mouth, okay? And so sometimes advocates of one or the other, that's where their argument lays. Oh, a bitless is not in the mouth, so it must be kinder. A bit, bit is in the mouth, so you've got more control, or something like that. And that's sort of the end of the conversation. So what I wanted to do was open the conversation in terms of how the equipment is supposed to work, or how it functions on the horse. Important parts that we need to note about the outside of the horse, which may surprise you when it comes to bits and bitless. And I guess what was the purpose of the design of the piece of equipment. Okay, So, for example, what I'm talking about there is if I go to a saddlery store and I buy a twisted wire bit, so a bit that is two pieces of metal and they're twisted together and it's quite thin, it by its very design is designed for pain compliance. You don't put a twisted wire bit in a horse's mouth not thinking that it's not going to hurt, okay? It's by its very design, it's designed to be sharper, okay? And more, have more feel, if you wanted to put it nicely, to the horse. But it's designed for pain compliance. It's a twisted wire bit, okay? There's other things that we've seen in the industry where you might see a bitless device that has huge, big, long shanks on it, okay? That is for leverage. It is for, again, pain compliance. So both, one's a bit and one's bitless, but they're both, by their very nature, designed to cause discomfort, at the very least, to the horse, and compliance, okay? What we call pain compliance. So this is what I'm talking about when you can't just say, I ride bitless, so I'm kinda, okay? Because that's not true. Depends on what bitless you use and what its function is. And when we have this conversation with a lot of people don't realize, they have never thought about how something works when it goes on their horse's head. So when we're talking about our horse, what we need to understand, and we often think about the bit. I speak to a lot of people and they're like, but the bit's in his mouth, and they get tied up with it being in the horse's mouth. And I think they're relating it, well, I wouldn't like something in my mouth and have someone talking to me, like dragging me around in my mouth. But we also have words and gestures and things like that in human to human. So it's not, you know, horses are very mouthy by nature, aren't they? They bite things, they groom each other. They're a lot more active with their mouth than we are. They pick things up. We don't pick things up with our mouth. So I think we just need to step outside that idea for a second and go, okay, well, horses are by nature more mouthy. They use their mouths a lot like hands because they don't have hands. They pick things up or explore things, that sort of stuff. Doesn't mean the mouth is any less sensitive. I'm just saying they're used to using their mouth for things. So we've got our skull here, and when we're talking about a bit, putting a bit in our horse's mouth, there are a few things that we need to be aware of in terms of our horse's comfort. The first is where the bit sits in relation to the teeth, okay? So if you've got a bit that's clanking or clunking on the horse's teeth, then it's going to be causing discomfort. If you've got a bit that is that you're riding in a style that brings it down onto the horse's bars of the horse's mouth, you're going to be causing discomfort, okay? I've got a skeleton here, obviously, that has no flesh on it, but what we have to remember is that inside the mouth here, you've got a tongue, which is a muscle, and you've got lots of skin and muscles on the outside and lots of nerves as well. So it's a very complicated design, I guess, the horse's skull, that we have to be aware of. So the bit sits inside the horse's mouth and can cause discomfort or pain when it's used on the bars of the horse's mouth. Think about when you've maybe run into your toe ball, metal on your shin. If you're riding with a style that brings that bit down onto the horse's bars, then that's the kind of discomfort that we can be talking about. If the bit's not sitting well in relation to the teeth, that's the kind of discomfort that we can be talking about. If the bit is doing a nutcracker action and poking up into the roof of the horse's mouth, I'm not sure whether you can see, I'll try and get a little closer, so you can see how thin this bone is here, okay? Up here, it's quite thick, all right? and down here it's very thin. So this is of course again covered with the roof of the horse's mouth. It's soft skin, but it's not that thick. So again, a really sensitive area when it comes to the bit. Okay, so we have to be sensitive to that bit sitting in the horse's mouth and how we're actually using it. Where we're placing our hands is going to change the angle of the bit. So if I put my hands low and wide, it's going to bring the bit down onto the horse's mouth. If I bring my hands higher, it's going to bring the bit into probably the more fleshy section of the horse's mouth. So the horse is going to be able to sort of move the bit a little bit with his tongue. He's going to be able to pick it up and down with the rest of his mouth and the rest of his flesh. So when you're talking about riding with a bit, if you're riding with it on the bars of the horse's mouth or in his teeth, then bits are bad. They're pain compliance. If you're riding with it in a more upright position where you're carrying it and it's fitted in a style that allows the horse to play with it and pick it up and down and move it with his mouth, he's actually got a bit of say about where that bit sits and how it's being used. And you've got the ability to feel that tongue, to feel the mouth, to feel everything into your hands and have a two-way conversation. So when you're talking about riding with a bit like that, it becomes a two-way conversation in which the horse is a significant part of that conversation and giving you feedback as part of that conversation. So instead of us just automatically having this idea of, oh, bits are bad because the bit's in the horse's mouth, we need to start saying, well, how am I using it and what feedback am I getting from the horse? Okay, so there's a bit of information about the inside of your horse's mouth and where the bit sits and fits. When it comes to the outside of the horse's face, where the bitless device will sit, we've got these holes here. So I'll try and bring it closer again. We've got these holes here. Okay, nerves. Nerves come on the outside of these, and it's the nerves that feed the upper lip or the upper part of the horse's face and nose. Down here, where are you? Down here, nerves, okay? Nerves that feed the lower part of the horse's face, okay? So you've got nerves coming from the top and the bottom, and they are overlaid with thin muscles that operate the horse's ability to, do the Fleeman response, which is when they put their lip up in the air. It allows them to sort their feed and distinguish between leaves and sticks and actual grass or forage and things like that. It allows them to leave the supplements in the bottom of the feed bin. Okay, so very, very sensitive. If you think you can put something in your horse, you can put a stone, I'm not recommending it, you can accidentally have a stone or a stick or something in your horse's feed bin and they won't eat it because they are so sensitive in their face that they can feel that in the feed. Okay, that's how sensitive their end of their lip is, and the nerves that are providing that sensitivity are coming here. So you start thinking about where we're putting. While I'm standing, I just want to show you something else. Look how thin this bone is. Okay, really, really tiny. So the skull comes down into a really thin bone. Okay, so too much pressure on that bone and you're going to cause pain compliance. You're going to cause an issue, okay? So you can see where the eyes are, and then that's the end of the nose. And so the end of the nose is also, there's cartilage around here, okay? Cartilage, it goes all the way down and creates the end of the nose and things like that. Obviously, cartilage rots away, so this is just the bony structure. So, we've got a tongue inside the horse's mouth and lips and things like that. The tongue is a muscle. And on the outside of the horse's face, you've got thin muscles and also a big nerve network. So when we start to talk about bits versus bitless, we start to realize that our bitless devices are on the outside of the face and potentially sitting on top of nerves, okay, which is not very comfortable, okay? So again, what we need to think about is fitting, okay, where things are sitting, how they're designed to operate. So let's talk about bitless. Some bitless devices are a simple hackamore, okay? And I'm talking about the traditional Western style hackamore, a rawhide loop around the horse's nose, okay? It's not a leverage device. It is a lateral device that's on a hanger. It just is a loop that sits around the horse's face. Now, depending on how you tie it and how it's been shaped, or how, you know, when they're new, they're not very shaped, they could sit too snug on the horse's face and cause discomfort across these bundles of nerves, okay? But they're not, the hackamore is not adding any pressure. So when you use the hackamore, and again, we'll do a whole show on how the stuff works. I'm just trying to give you a brief overview in terms of bit versus bitless. The hackamore sits around here and literally just moves sort of up and down. So providing that it's fitted well, it's not designed to squeeze down on the horse's face, okay? It doesn't change in its sizing. Some bitless devices have an action where they come around the horse's nose and they've got a cross underneath. So they come across here, and then as they go under the horse's nose, there's often two little loops, and the nose band comes out into two reins that cross under the chin. What happens with that action is that as you pick up and pull on those reins, that circle around the horse's nose gets smaller. So that's a crushing action on the horse's face, okay? Again, a lot of people don't realize, they think bitless is kinder, and they don't realize that action, you've got that device sitting around the horse's, over these nerves and little muscles, and we know how sensitive it is, and we've got the nerves coming out down the bottom as well. It'll probably sit about here, and it's actually applying a squeezing pressure on top of the nerves. So a traditional hackamore is sitting at whatever tightness it is. It doesn't get tighter or looser. The cross under style bitless bridles, they get tighter, and then when you release the rein, they're not great. The ones that I've seen, and I've seen multiple different styles of them, they don't have a swift release because of the design of the materials and things like that. They can often be a little bit grabby, and so they will relax, but they won't fully loosen. There's not a full switch off, okay? There's another style of bitless, which is a side pull or a loping hackamore or something like that. So a side pull is basically just a loop of some description around the horse's face. So it could be, they're made of multiple materials, so we won't worry too much about talking about materials. But the side pull has one rein affixed on the right-hand side of the horse's face, one rein affixed on the left-hand side of the horse's face. So they are really significantly lateral in that if you pick up on the right rein, I pick up on the right rein over here, it doesn't close, as in, again, it stays the same size. It's not designed to get smaller or bigger at all. It just puts feel on the outside of the horse's face and guides the horse's face to the right or to the left. So they're very much a side pull, are very much what I would call like painting by numbers, clear signal to the horse. Go that way, go that way. Okay, so again, they're more lateral, so they're not designed for a huge amount of vertical flexion or self-carriage. Having said that, if the horse is carrying his body correctly, he doesn't need anything on his face for self-carriage, but that's a whole nother show as well. I should be writing these down. I'll be getting all these ideas. I'll have enough shows to last me till the end of the year. Then you've got another type of bitless bridle, which is in Europe, they're called hackamores. A lot of people call them hackamores in Europe, but they are actually mechanical hackamores. And so they're the ones that you'll see with a nose band that goes over here and a chin band that goes around here. But on the side of the horse's face, there's some kind of mechanism. So some of them have big shanks. So you'll have a metal dial and a long shank. So the bottom of the dial is attached to the chin strap. The top of the dial is attached to the nose strap. And then the shank has the rein on it. And what happens when you pull that shank, it pulls the chin strap up and pushes the nose band down, again in that crushing action or in that squeezing action. The difference between, the difference in that is because of the little arm that goes down, it provides you with more leverage. Okay, so the little shank that comes down provides you with more, it multiplies your strength basically on the mechanical hackamores. And then you've got things like the flower hackamore, which has like a little dial. It doesn't have the leverage on it, but again, that as you pull the bottom of the flower up, the top of the flower goes down, and again it results in a crushing or a squeezing action around the delicate areas of the horse's face. So now that we're talking about how these things work, you can see that something as simple as a snaffle bit compared to something that multiplies a crushing action like a mechanical hackamore, I would rather, personally, because I'm not into riding my horses with pain compliance, I would rather ride my horse with a snaffle bit if I only had to choose between those two things. So not all bit versus bitless are created equal. It's not as simple as saying bitless is out of the horse's mouth. It is out of the horse's mouth, but it's onto the nerves and the sensitive area of the horse's face. Yeah. So we have to really think about how we ride, what the purpose of our riding is, and what we're going to be doing with that equipment. So they're the different styles of bitless and a brief overview of how they work. The other thing that we have to think about with bitless is not only the nerves, but as I said, this really thin bone here. So if I was to put even a side pull on this horse, and if I fitted it too low, it could be used with pain compliance because it would be on that sensitive nose area, okay, that sensitive thin bone. So I want to make sure that I'm fitting it up here. Along with this information, we need to think about sometimes my snaffle bridles, even though I've just explained how a snaffle is a pretty straightforward device, and if we're riding with it lifted, it's not being used in a pain compliant way. If we're fitting a nose band over the top of that snaffle, now we're interfering with the horse's ability to move his jaw and open his mouth. And so we're adding another level of interference to that snaffle. So we have to look at the whole picture, the whole piece of equipment and how it's worked. So a snaffle bridle with no nose band is very different to a snaffle bridle fitted with a cross nose band or a drop nose band or a simple nose band, etc., etc. We've got to look at all of this equipment, where it fits on the horse and how it's designed to work. The other things that we have to be aware of when it comes to our horse's skull are like the cheekbones. So if you've got, these can be quite sharp. So if you've got your bridle, you need to think about where the buckles and things like that sit in relation to those bony structures of the horse's skull. So really, that's all I wanted to talk about with bit versus bitless. I guess I want to end by saying it's not as straightforward or as simple as bits are bad, bitless is good, or bits have more control, bitless don't have control, etc., etc. You've got to pick up your personal individual piece of equipment and think, where does it fit in or on the horse's face? What is it activating? How is it working? And is there a multiplication of pressure? That's a really good one to ask ourselves. As I said, the vertical bits or leverage bits have a multiplication of pressure because of the shanks. Bitless bridles with the shanks have a multiplication of pressure. Bitless bridles with the cross under have a squeezing action. There's different, you have to look at each individual piece of equipment and say, am I okay with that action happening to my horse? So often what we can do, a little thing, depending on what you're road testing, you can actually put the thing around your own leg, especially in the terms of bitless, and you can feel what it feels like. Get someone to pull on the reins behind you, and then you'll be able to feel, you use your upper thigh as your horse's face, and feel what they feel like. It's not perfect, but it's a little thing that you can do. And those that are riding in a bit, you can put them in maybe the crook of your arm, and the same thing. Ask someone to pull their hands low, pull their hands high, pull their hands back, pull their hands close together, put them wider apart. Everything changes depending on how we're riding and how we're activating pieces of equipment on our horse's face. Something to be really conscious of. So that's bit versus bitless. There's no definitive answer. It all comes down to the individual piece of equipment, and it comes down to the horse. The horse will tell you if he's upset about something, hopefully, but if your horse has been trained to be obedient, he might not tell you that he's upset with something. So sometimes it's worth trying to look at different things to try and figure out if the horse is happy with how you're riding and what you're riding in. That brings us to a product review of this week. And this week I am reviewing these hybrid hackamores. So these are from a company called Go Bitless here in Australia. I know they've got a Facebook page. I think they've got an Instagram. Or if you send me a message, I can forward you a phone number or an email address if you're wanting to get in contact with them. So this is based on a traditional hackamore. So when I said a traditional hackamore, this is the sort of what a lot of people might call it a bow sow. Especially here in Australia, we often will call it a bow sow. So when I'm talking about a traditional hackamore, this is the shape and everything that I'm talking about. It's got a heel knot, just a simple loop around the horse's nose, and like I say, it's not designed to squeeze in or open out or anything like that. Now, this is made by, as I said, Go Bitless. The gentleman's name who makes them is Lachlan. And what Lockie's come up with is this design, which is, he calls it a hybrid. It's a hybrid hackamore, and the hybrid part of it is that it's synthetic material. So as you can see, this one's fluorescent pink with like a black detail, which is kind of cool. The core is a, I believe it's he's made it up. It's like a leather. There's some natural materials in there. It's sort of like a leather, and I don't know what the other thing is, but he kind of lays them in on top of each other to create a core that can still be shaped. So these, our concern with a synthetic hackamore is always whether or not it's going to take a shape. So when you go back to talking about maybe a side pull or something like that, or even riding in a halter, they don't take a shape. So, riding in a halter, they're sort of floppy around the horse's face, or a bitless bridle or something like that. They don't actually mold or change to the horse's face. So what we love about traditional hackamores, rawhide hackamores, is that when you put them on the horse, if you ride them on the same horse all the time, they actually start to change shape, like leather, natural materials soften and change shape and adopt the shape and customize themselves to the horse's face. So our concern about synthetic hackamores or synthetic products is always that they don't take a shape. But Lachlan's hybrid core in these do actually take a shape. You can use a shaping block on these hackamores, and of course they will take a shape over use over time on the horse's face. So I have a lot of traditional hackamores, rawhide hackamores, and I am a little bit of a traditionalist where that's what I run on my horses. But when it comes to these hybrid hackamores, what I do love about them, there are multiple benefits to these hybrid hackamores. First one is the concern about them not taking a shape is gone because we know that they take a shape. We have road tested these and they will take a shape on the horse's face. So I love that about them, that they will take a shape. The second thing that I love about them is that they are a really good price point for people wanting to try riding in a hackamore and see if it suits them and see if their horse suits them. A rawhide hackamore and this entire rig with the hanger, the hackamore or the bow saddle, as a lot of people will call it in Australia, and the Macate rein in natural materials, in rawhide and leather and horsehair reins, they can run upwards of $700, $800, $900, $1,000 for the whole rig. So this synthetic rig with the hybrid core, I believe they're retailing at the moment for about $295. So they're a really cool price point for people that maybe want to try, see how their horse goes, but they're not really sure, etc., etc. Third thing that I love is that they're being made right here in Australia. Lachlan is on the Gold Coast in Queensland, so he is able to be, here in Australia. You can talk to him over Facebook, you can ring him on the phone, he will take you through how to measure and all that sort of stuff. So I really like that ease of access in terms of, I guess, custom making something for your own horse. He will custom make them in terms of sizing. So I've got two here. I've actually got a third one that's a pony size that I've lent to someone. So this one's a huge one that's been made for like a big sort of Shire sort of size horse, and then you've got a regular size horse, and then you've got smaller ones for ponies or smaller, Arabians, things like that. So I love that you can really easily measure your horse and get something that's essentially custom made for your horse. Obviously the cool colors, you can choose. He's got all range of colors. It is synthetic material on the outside. It's just like a yachting braid kind of material on the outside. So again, you can choose whatever colors you want, things like that. And the other thing that's really cool about synthetic material is it's probably a little bit more easy to take care of and not as sensitive to the elements. So the inside the core, I'm not saying that you can go swimming in the ocean with this and then just forget about it. But what I am saying is that you probably can get this, if I was going to go to the beach or something like that and take my horse swimming, I would take this one because again, it is synthetic. It's going to probably dry a lot quicker. The reins are, just rope. So they're going to dry a lot quicker. Those of you that have ridden in horsehair reins and things like that, they get really stiff. They can get kinks in them. They, there can be problems with leaving them tied, all that sort of stuff. So these are really easy to take care of. And you probably don't have as many concerns in terms of, where they're hanging, making sure that they're not in, too humid, too wet, too, left tied up because the rawhide will bend. That, like, you do have to really take care of those traditional ones, and especially because you have spent so much money on them, you want to take care of those ones really sort of it's kind of like having what was that thing? It's kind of like having a gremlin. You know, you don't take it out after midnight, you can't get it wet, that sort of thing. So these are a lot more robust when it comes to those of us that love just hacking out on trails or going to the beach or whatever, you can hang them up. I would probably still untie it because they do take a shape. You don't want to leave it tied for too long, but I'm really pedantic with my rawhide one. I untie it every single time. This one can probably stand to be tied for, you know, a little bit longer than that. You know, I'm sort of umming and ahhing because I don't want to say 3 days or a week or 2 weeks or whatever. Maybe talk to Lachlan, he'd probably give you the answer for that. So definitely love a lot of benefits for the synthetic Go Bitless hackamore. And I think it's a really great entry-level product for those of you that are wanting to try it, or even a product for those of you who ride in a hackamore already and, like I say, want to have something that's a little bit more robust to go trail riding or something like that in. So, yeah, definitely a thumbs up from me on that one. We're almost at the end of the show, and I just wanted to share with you a little bit of industry news. I thought I would try and share a little bit of industry news that was relevant to this Bit versus Bitless debate, I guess. And I think it doesn't need to be a debate. For those of you interested, I ride in all of it. You know, Booty is ridden in a hackamore at the moment, but she will go into the 2-rein and then straight up into the bridle. Cooper, I rode him in a snaffle when I needed to ride him in a snaffle. I rode him in a western bit when I needed to ride him in a western bit. I rode him in a hackamore. And then I've got Galliano, my warm blood, who I ride in a snaffle bit. So I've got no issue with any of the equipment. Unless it's designed for pain, like I was saying, if you're going out and buying a twisted wire bit, probably invest in a little bit more training as opposed to investing in, you know, something that's going to cause the horse pain. But other than that, I ride bitless. I only ride in hackamore, so I don't ride in bitless bridles or anything like that. And with a bit. I also can ride my horses bridleless. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of. I'm a real person that rides my horse's body, I'm not reliant on what's on my horse's face, okay? So the industry news that I wanted to share, I guess some of you might have been interested that in 2019, okay, let me rewind. When you're riding official dressage, when you get to a certain level, you are required to go into a double bridle, okay? That's set down by the FEI. In 2019, they adjusted that rule, and so people had a choice to continue riding into a snaffle into a little bit of a higher level. But still, when it came, I'm not 100% across exactly what level happens when, but my understanding is that it used to be advanced, you had to go into a double bridle. Then in 2019, they changed it where you could go beyond advanced level and still ride in a snaffle, but in the really high level Grand Prix, you have to ride in a double bridle. So it's up for review again. The World Bitless Association have put it in as a rule recommendation that they're trying to get it so you can ride in a snaffle bit all the way up to Grand Prix. I think it should be allowed. I don't think that riding in a snaffle versus riding in a double bridle, I think typically it would be considered that you would have the advantage in the double bridle because the double bridle obviously has not only the snaffle lateral device, but it's got the leverage device in it as well. So whilst it's more complex to ride with the double bridle and the double reins, you technically have leverage, whereas in the snaffle you don't have the leverage. So there might be advantages to riding in the double bridle, but there also might be, I guess it's seen that you have an advantage of riding in the snaffle where you don't have the double reins. But the industry news that I'm presenting to you it's on the radar. Basically, the World Bitless Association are very active in trying to get rule changes at the high level of the FEI. And whilst a lot of us might not even compete under Equestrian, those of us in Australia, it's called Equestrian Australia, or, you know, I just say FEI, so Federal Equestrian International. So that's for the worldwide. And then there's branches for every country across the world. And we talk about that because they're the ones that are doing the rules and everything for the Olympics. So I think that those rules tend to influence what's happening through clubs and pony clubs. But then, of course, you've got a whole Western set of rules, depending on Western, you know, the AQHA has rules, the Pony Halls. Every different society has rules, but if you see a rule change at a significant level, like the FEI, then hopefully that at least puts the idea in people's minds or in other clubs' minds and things like that. So a little bit of industry news there in relation to bits and bitting. One last thing that I wanted to talk about, I meant to talk about this when I had the skull out. This is a fantastic book, Horses Inside Out, Illustrated Head Anatomy. It's a multimedia book by Gillian Higgins, Horses Inside Out. If you look them up, you'll find it. It gives you the whole head anatomy, how it relates to the body, what's in the skull there, nerves, muscles, the hyoid bone there, how it works, everything that's happening with your horse's head. So I think if we're going to go into a bit versus bitless debate, we need to have a read through that book first and really have a good understanding of where our equipment works and how it functions. Thanks so much for watching Let's Talk Horses this week, and I look forward to hearing your comments.